clerk is with us. Are you the gentleman from River Rose? Great, okay. So the first item, opening at 7:01, the first item is opportunity to request a vote to add or modify agenda items. I have no changes.
I don't either.
I'm good.
Okay, we'll proceed to presentation by River Rose. Mr. Panzella, yes? I think you need to unmute
Peter,
yourself.
Peter, you're muted. You're muted.
And while you're working on unmuting, I just want to be clear that we're not taking any decisions on this evening. Mr. Panzella asked to make a presentation to the board. So we're here to listen, but
Yeah, he's
there's
good.
nothing we're making a decision on this evening.
I understand that. My name is Peter Iannone. Can you hear me clearly?
Mr. Iannone, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm here to represent Mr. Panzella. And we certainly want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be with the trustees this evening. Apparently, according to Mr. Vidakovich, the trustees have had the opportunity to have a printed copy of the proposal that we've made to the village. And I'm open to questions, or if you would like, I would review that proposal briefly, if you would like.
I think that's a good idea, briefly.
Okay. Basically, what we were proposing, the venue would be the River Rose would operate either out of water or dockside in the village of Cold Spring to host small events like weddings, class reunions, corporate events, etc. And we do not have a galley aboard. So in order to host those events, we would be utilizing all of the catering capabilities of all the restaurants in the village of Cold Spring, which we feel would be to advantage of those businesses as well. And we would operate this as a seasonal business from May through November. And we feel that this would be a great addition to the already wonderful attractions in the village of Cold Spring. And as one of 40 to 50 paddle wheelers that are actually left in the entire country, we feel this could be a very good draw as far as tourism to the village of Cold Spring from the New York City metro area. And with the addition of legacy media contact and continued advertising through legacy media, we feel it would be a big advantage not only to the village of Cold Spring, but to the surrounding area and also to the merchants. As far as operating parameters, we have a full schedule of how we would maintain the boat. And of course, that won't be covered this evening because it goes into quite a bit of detail. But we're prepared also to meet requirements that the village of Cold Spring, the fire department, and any other municipality authorities would require. And again, it's something that we feel very strongly about because Captain Panzella has had quite a relationship with the village of Cold Spring for the past 40 years. He considers Cold Spring a legend on the Hudson River. And he also considers, of course, his craft, his vessel, the River Rose, a legend, being one of the few paddle wheelers left in the country. And we feel it would be a win-win situation for the other merchants in the village of Cold Spring and for the village of Cold Spring itself, again, for tourism. And I would invite, pardon me, I would invite any questions that you would have, considering what I've already just explained.
So I'm a little confused about what you're proposing because the drawings indicate that the boat will be buried in the ground or tied to the dock.
Right. So basically, it's a two-pronged approach. The reason why we sent you the proposal as it was written is depending on what the village of Cold Spring would like, we would have the option, depending on what the village wants, of being dockside, that is in the water, to allow people to embark and disembark, or the boat could also be showcased outside the water on land as kind of like a an attraction that would be on land versus in the water. But we're open to either venue, depending on what the village of Cold Spring decides would be the best interest for them and for the tourists that come to Cold Spring.
Questions from board members?
I just have a couple of quick questions. So if it was in ground, I would assume that you're looking at something that's adjacent to the water, not necessarily completely landlocked, right?
Correct, because we would want to showcase the boat for people that would be on the village side, on the land side, but also would want it within view of the river to showcase it on both the river side and on the land side. That's correct.
Okay. And this would be almost like a permanent docking, right? It's not necessarily you come on a Friday, you leave on a Saturday. This is, once it's set up, you're going to be there for the season, right? Is that what you're?
Correct. And the season would be approximately, again, open to discussion, but the season would be approximately May through November, something to that nature.
Got it. And just one last question. Where is the
Yes.
River Rose now? I mean, what, like last summer, where did you call home base, or was?
Our home port is Newburgh, New York, on the Newburgh waterfront. And currently we're in dry dock, awaiting a decision as to what we want to do with the future of the River Rose.
Got it.
But we're currently in dry dock.
Okay.
Catherine, questions from you?
I'm not even sure what I want to say. So have you considered where dry dock you would want to put the boat?
Insofar as placement of the boat in Cold Spring, if I understand the question correctly?
Yeah.
Well, again, obviously, we would want to be somewhere on the waterfront in Cold Spring to showcase the boat, as I had previously stated, for the river view and for the land view. And of course, we're open to discussing with Cold Spring where that would be a mutually acceptable location for both the village and for us.
Yeah, because putting it in the water at the dock, you know, I mean, it's further down the road, but I have questions about silt and SAVs, so I'm not sure that water is the best option.
Well, we had previously, as we stated in the proposal that we sent down, you know, dockside park waterfront was one thing that we mentioned in the actual proposal that we sent down. But again, that would be open to discussion with the village as to insofar as where would be the best place in our mutual interests. But again, it would be more desirable, of course, to be very, very paramount to be somewhere along the river where we would be able to showcase the boat for the benefit of the village and for the benefit of the customers to be able to see from riverside view as well as land view.
So piggybacking on that, if you were to put it on dry land, would that still be made in November? You're going to sort of dig it up and move it?
No, I think
That would be permanent?
yeah, it would be more or less, if it was on land, it would be a fixture that would be there throughout the season. But of course, it would be winterized, et cetera, for the winter season, but it would be available as soon as May came around as an attraction for the village. Yes.
Yeah, didn't seem practical to dig it out.
Pardon
Thank
me?
you. I said it did not seem practical to dig it out.
No. It would, if it was going to be on land, it would be something that would be a fixture. Yes.
Any
Good for me.
further questions? Okay, I can tell you, Mr. Iannone, I'm crystal clear on this. Dockside is a state-owned property. The village manages the property. The state has very restrictive guidance for what can be installed permanently or built permanently at Dockside. And that waterfront right now is in the process of a shoreline stabilization project. to restore the natural shoreline and create a sustainable shoreline that can withstand inundation at the waterfront. So dockside is a very unlikely and not appropriate location. At our dock, our dock is not built to permanently moor boats. There would need to be engineering studies. The purpose that dock was built to encase cadmium that was remained after the cleanup of the West Point Foundry Preserve. And the stability of that dock is essential. It's not built for permanent docking. So that would be an engineering study. And also, we do have large vessels that dock here for temporary periods. And among feedback from the public, folks who live in the village is they want to see the mountain. They don't want to look at a boat all day long. So, and you've talked too about, parking could be available for guests on village-owned property. Would that were the case? We don't have a lot of parking in the village. It's already at a premium. So we don't have parking to accommodate this on our waterfront. So it's a very cool idea. My personal view is Cold Spring is not your space. It's not the spot to do it. We have more than enough attraction for tourists than we can handle, where we are inundated already in the tourist season. So in my mind, this is not in keeping with our the way our comprehensive plan thinks about our waterfront and the way our village is currently the weight that we currently bear of tourism. So that's my view, and I think that it's an amazing boat. It will be a cool attraction where it lands, but I don't think Cold Spring is your spot.
All right. Well, I will certainly transmit this information to Captain Panzella, and I appreciate the time and the consideration this evening. And I would also ask that you would be open for some additional dialogue after I discuss this with Captain Panzella. I understand everything you said, and I appreciate that. But perhaps we can discuss it a bit further in the future, just to button up the whole situation, if that's agreeable to you and to the trustees.
I mean, you can certainly send communication after you speak with him.
Okay.
See what he has to say. But again, just repeating, dockside is a state-owned property that the village manages. So we have to follow the guidelines of our agreement with the state.
And that dockside is you're referring to the park that's on the river that we were discussing in our proposal.
Right. That's right.
And they control all of the area, including areas in the water that are adjacent to the property.
Areas in the water, it would have to be a conversation, I would imagine, with DOS and DEC. That's a much bigger conversation than the village.
Okay.
And well, I imagine too, that would be an Army Corps of Engineer conversation as well. So it's not just as simple as you can pull up a boat and leave it in the water.
Oh, I certainly understand that, yeah. But I just wanted to understand the conditions between the state-owned property and the actual water. When you say discuss with the Army Corps of Engineers or the DEC, then there's interplay between those two people and the state-owned property, or are they
I couldn't tell you what is required for mooring rights in the Hudson River. That's not an area that the village has purview over, and it's certainly not an area where I have expertise. But if I were someone looking to moor a boat in the Hudson River, those would be questions I'd be asking.
Right, and we're very
law that you need to be addressing.
Right, and we appreciate that. We're very familiar with the DEC, with everyone else in charge of rights on the water, and I appreciate that input. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for your presentation.
Thank you, and we will be in touch.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda is a housekeeping item left over from last week. It is a 30-day notice for a liquor license application at Paulette's Coffee Shop, Bistro, Cafe. She has applied for a license for, I believe,
Wine,
wine, beer,
beer.
and cider. There is no action for the village to take on this. It's a courtesy notice from the State Liquor Authority. And it has been available on our website and will continue to be with meeting minutes. Any discussion?
So if the state approves the license, then it's the go? That's the process?
Yeah, the State Liquor Authority has all the purview over that.
Got it.
I imagine that if a municipality had objection, there would be a process for that, but I don't see that we have an objection. Do we have an objection?
No,
Okay.
no, they only, if the community, like if there's a community board in Manhattan and the people are smoking and drinking out on the sidewalk and such, then that would be an issue, but certainly not here and not at Paulette's.
Okay.
Okay. I think that we have Stefan. I'm sorry that I don't remember how to pronounce your name properly. Stefan, can you say it for me, please?
Hi, Danisic.
Danisic, thank you. I'm moving this item up actually now that I see he's with him, since the community day event is a longer discussion and I don't want to keep you hanging on for your evening. So the Stefan has a property at 31 Church Street. At some point in the past, a sidewalk, there are images, Jeff, if you want to share them on screen. The sidewalk, the tree lawn was removed from the sidewalk and the sidewalk was extended all the way to the roadway with a very small curb. By the size of the aggregate that's used in the sidewalk, it's been there quite some time. I would guess 70s or so. And Stefan and his wife Tracy have asked about the possibility of including a grass strip, a tree lawn, and potentially planting a tree there. So a couple of things. Joe and I went to the site. And while we agree that it's a location where a tree lawn would be beneficial, Stefan, I want to be very straightforward and say that right now we have a long, I'll give you my view and then we'll let others chime in. We have a very long list of real infrastructure needs and urgencies that we have to address, and they have to take the first call on our dollars right now.
Sure.
This is a great idea. It's a beautification project that we don't have money for right now. And given the way the shape of the curb and the fact that the water shut off, you see that circle there, that the water shut off needs to be cleared from whenever that sidewalk was poured poorly over the water shut off. There are lots of issues to address here. And it is lower, it is very honestly lower down on the list right now. And the things that have to be addressed there's a lot of work on Church and other streets with actual street work that will get us toward beautification. But we need to think of them sort of comprehensively as we address the whole street.
Sure. Understood.
Are there, anything you'd like to add or ask about? And for trees, by the way, I would have a conversation with Jen Zwarek, who is the chair of our tree advisory board and plans the planting of public trees.
Okay.
They think long-term about our urban forest and planning for native species and maintenance, et cetera.
Okay.
And
Is this something I should bring up again next summer maybe? I'm sure it's not going to sit on a list anywhere.
well, so street paving is among the multitude of items that need to be addressed. We need to prioritize which streets get hit first, get repaved first, and get sidewalk repairs first. That's a process we're undergoing right now. We do have CHIPS money available for paving, and we will be doing paving in the village, either in-house or with by subbing that work out. So I would say stay tuned to both our budget process and our ongoing capital planning when we order sort of find a way to prioritize which streets get hit in which season.
Great. Okay.
Would
We certainly see the work that needs doing. Go ahead, Joe.
would it be a good idea to have either Matt or Bugsy from Water or Highway just take a look at that water shutoff valve?
Yeah, I had a conversation with both of them about it today. This is a problem all over the village. It's a
Okay.
couple of decades old where there was apparently some rivalry between departments, and one department wanted to make it a little less easy for the other to do its job. And Matt and Bugsy spend a chunk of their time unearthing the water shutoffs. It's a reality of the village, a strange one, but it's true.
I think there's one on High Street right in front of 11.
It's really problematic because, of course, if we needed an emergency shut off, we can't access it in the places where that's been done. So it's that would have to get done before the tree lawn for sure.
So if there's an emergency, what do? They have to dig it up and then that's how they shut it off? Is that how it works?
That's what I understand.
Okay.
So that is where we are on our list of things to do. I wish that I could say a happier, yay, yes, we're gonna beautify in front of your house.
Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you.
I'll vote for it the next time it comes up.
Yes,
Just with-
yes, absolutely.
I valued the one I used to have.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, have a good night.
Okay.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Nice when someone wants to do that kind of stuff.
and it will be when it happens, it will be a lovely addition on Church Street. Church Street needs some trees desperately.
High Street has a section like that too, in front of 9.
Well, I mean, there was a time in the village when paving everything over was of value. And there are a lot of places that have fewer green areas than we would want them to have now. And that we work toward that. It's one of the reasons we have the tree advisory board.
Less impervious is better, huh?
Yes, exactly. So, Community Day. I wasn't expecting that we would be 3 of us tonight, but we do need to have an initial discussion. So the Community Day is an event that happened for many years and didn't happen for some time and then got revived. For a time, it was done on the 4th of July as part of that celebration. There was a movement away from that, or at least commentary about having it on 4th of July because it is so blasting hot on the 4th of July. And the parade is tough in the heat. And so Community Day in 2020 and 4th of July celebrations were canceled because of COVID. Was delayed last year while people were being, vaccination was expanding. Numbers of vaccinated folks were growing until numbers came down and we could get a sense of how safe we could keep folks in a large group. And so as the numbers came down, Community Day was pushed to Labor Day, and it was really great. The previous board, Mayor Morandi, really loves Community Day and put a lot of work into making Community Day great with music. And last year, the 5K race for the hub happened on the same day. Bouncy toys, food, fundraisers for local nonprofits, great time. And there was quite a lot of feedback about how it was nice to have a celebration at the end of the summer to close out the summer. So now that we are gathering again, and we hope that we continue to be able to gather as we watch numbers ever so slightly start to climb again, the question becomes, what do we do as a community for celebration? 2 big events is a lot. My view is that it does need to be volunteer driven and committee driven. It's not the job of the trustees to plan events and put them on, although we're certainly all happy to throw in and help. It needs to be volunteer driven. So I wanted to have a discussion about, at this stage, it's probably too late to get fireworks on the 4th of July. West Point does do fireworks the weekend of the 4th of July, and we can sit by the water and watch them across. So I'm throwing out the idea that we think about convening a committee to bring back Community Day in September, and I'm looking for thoughts of yours.
Okay. I wasn't in attendance last September. I was away, but I did hear that it was an excellent event, well attended and everything. It kind of served its purpose immensely. I mean, I don't necessarily think we should have two events. If a consensus is that September is a better event and more reasonable to manage, then I'm all in favor of September. I agree it should be community driven and we could help facilitate. But I don't know if we should be planning the event on a weekly basis. I don't know how it's been done in the past. I know Bruce Campbell used to be very involved.
Yes.
I know Dave was very involved. I don't know how it ran last year, other than what you just said. So I'm all in favor of September and make it as community minded as possible, whatever that means. And there's a lot of creative people in the village. I'm sure they would add an enormous amount to an event. So I'm all in. One event, not two. I'm not in favor of two events.
I agree. I think that we, closing out the summer with the event, it's cooler. There's enough fireworks around in July that people will have them. And, there aren't any fireworks on in September. So gives the fireworks fans, another opportunity. And there was a great committee, I think, Angela Savina.
Yes.
She was on that committee and
Golden.
yep.
Yeah, there were a bunch of folks.
I was on it when it was the 4th of July. The last time I was on the board. So I would definitely be in favor of September as opposed to July.
And, importantly, Dockside is going to be under construction all summer, and we're likely to have more access to Dockside come September. And that's not a small detail. Okay, so Jeff, do we need a motion to choose Labor Day weekend for Community Day?
I don't know. That's, you can make a motion, make it official. And that's when you'll hold it.
Just one more question, I guess, before we motion it or whatever that.
Yes.
In the event Dockside isn't finished, which might be the case, what's the alternative? Is it just happen on the bandstand, or, I mean, how would that potentially work? I mean, it's a logistical question that probably should be addressed up front.
Yeah, I mean, options would be the actual dock, focusing around the dock and the riverfront park. Another option would be Mayor's Park.
Oh, okay, right. Okay.
I think too, getting away from the 4th, the 4th is a busy visitor weekend. And by the time we get round to Labor Day, it starts to feel a little bit more like old home days, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I think last year, all the music and everything was done from at the bandstand and not at Dockside Park. Dockside Park was open for people if they wanted to go in there.
And the bouncy houses were there.
Yeah,
It's been done a number of ways with the bandstand set up in Dockside. The one I love having the bandstand used for music. Some of the feedback that I heard from musicians is that it's blinding. It's hard to be in the sun and in the heat at the bandstand. So that may be a factor. These are all excellent questions to turn over to a committee.
And the flagpole is dead center.
And the flagpole center.
It's as it should be. I'm not in favor of moving the flagpole, but when you put, for doing the music series when I did, it was this, and at least by September, the time is a little better, but in July and August, it was pretty hot.
Excuse me one second. There's someone opening my door. Oh, Anne, hi. I've got keys. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, lock me in, please. Thanks. I'm sorry about that. I thought everyone was gone. Okay, so we will put an announcement on the website and social media asking for volunteers and hope folks who've done it before and had a great time would want to step forward and do it again.
Is there a date?
So I believe it was Sunday last summer, the Sunday of Labor Day. Is that right?
Right.
Remember, Jeff?
I have to go back and check. I don't remember off the top of my head.
And that is also a question that could be determined by the committee, is which of those days. It needs to get nailed down pretty soon, though. I know that the hub would like to piggyback again with their 5K race.
Why don't we identify it as early September, and when the committee gets together, let them
Yeah.
handle the X's and O's. Maybe they would
Yeah.
determine another Sunday's better than that.
Sure.
And if they're going to be organizing and running it, I would defer to their judgment.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, so we're moving to form a committee to plan for Community Day in early September. Second,
Second,
all in favor?
aye.
Aye. Michelle. Have we hit everything else? Yes, we have. So continued budget discussion. Hello. Hello.
Hi, Michelle.
Oh, done,
So we
Michelle.
have met in 2 sessions so far. We've had an initial personnel discussion, personnel portion of the budget. We had a revenue discussion earlier in the week, or was that last week? It's all kind of blending at this point.
2 days
Yesterday.
ago.
Yesterday.
2 days yesterday. And tonight we're talking about expenses. So Michelle, would you like to lead us through?
Okay, so before we move into the expenses, I just want to wrap up and summarize some of our revenue discussion. So after our meeting, we talked about making some changes. Increasing a little bit for the police fees, the parking meters, Parks and Rec, because of those 2 large events, sale of property and sale of equipment, and we come up with an additional $25,000 into the budget. We added $300,000 for capital projects from fund balance to allocate as necessary. And now our budget, right as it stands now, is balanced for now. We talked about the tax levy and how right now it's illustrated as being the full tax levy, with the understanding that we're going to try and move forward and bring down some of the expense sides so that we can lower the amount of taxes that we need to raise. Some pending topics that may raise revenue, that may help, is the exact implementation of the Main Street parking with the residential parking, the fees for both of those. C Street is included in the budget, but we need to remember that that's still being negotiated, so we don't have an exact number. I have an average of 20,000, but that's subject to change. And those are the 3 big things. The residential parking, Main Street parking is 1, tax levy, and C Street are the 3 things that are still up in the air that I just want to make sure that we come back to before we finalize the budget. In terms of revenue on the general fund, does anybody have any follow-up questions?
So, Michelle, with regards to the CHIPS money, which is New York State generated, we'll have a more definitive number if and when the state adopts their budget April 1st?
Yes, so they'll adopt it on April 1st, but we won't have our number on April 1st. The DOT is good about keeping CHIPS allocation posted to the website. They update it frequently. It usually takes about at least 2 weeks to get up on the website
Okay,
to know what our upcoming allocation will be.
got it. And what else was I gonna ask about revenue wise?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just, Michelle, when do people get their parking permit for residential parking down below below the tracks?
It's varied, it's 2 years, depends on when they applied. So there's not one set time throughout the year. There's
So
not
it's
one set date.
on, it's on a calendar from when they get it. It's just a 12-month
Correct.
rolling?
It's a 2-month, it's a 2-year permit.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry to jump in like that.
And is that period code defined? The 24 months for that section of residential parking?
Is it what?
Code defined,
No,
24 months?
well, 24 months is, it's, but yeah, like I said, there's no specific date.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on revenue on the general fund?
No, not as
Not
of
right
yet.
now, no.
Okay. And then I have sent everybody a revised copy of the revenue budget as it stands right now with those changes.
And Michelle, to make sure I'm looking at the right one, 3/15 is the date on the revised, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So we also talked yesterday a little bit about water and sewer revenue. We're meeting with Matt tomorrow. So I think that the pending, having some discussions with Matt will help drive the revenue discussion further on the water and sewer side. So we'll put that on hold for right now. The water budget is balanced for right now. Sewer, I'll have it balanced for Sunday for the tentative, with the caveat on all of these that we're working on the revenues and the expenses, and we're trying we're going to make changes, but it'll be balanced for now, and it'll be a good start, and it'll be mostly complete, but we'll try to cut expenses where we can to not have to raise taxes and rates as much.
And Michelle, just for public information, this is a sort of the standard way that municipal budgeting works, right? The state sets its calendar, we meet the calendar. Our first goal post is posting a tentative budget, and then we cut and add and change from there to get to a final number. And then there is a public hearing at the end of that process for comment.
Yes, the tentative budgets, it's really just a draft budget. It's not made to be perfect. It's made to be a document to drive further discussion on.
Thanks.
Okay, so then moving on to general fund expenses. So in the process of planning for next year, I did some projections for expenses this year. And that's in the financial statements on the proposed budget for next year. It's a separate column. I don't want to go through all of that, but if someone has questions, we can. But there are some categories. I sent a list, general fund expenses to spend by May 31st. And just want to call out some things that we should try and spend this year because they've been budgeted for, and then we don't have to budget for them again next year.
Michelle, excuse me, is that an updated version from?
I sent it, I think, yesterday. It's got a green column on it.
Oh, yep. I've got that. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
So we're all color coded. So we talked about putting out the RFP for an engineer. If that comes through, there is, $10,000 that we can do at least one project and try and focus on something before May 31st. For records management, there was a payment, the first payment for E-code. E-code is a 3-year payment plan. If the code's not done, Jeff, I would believe that we can't start E-code, or would they be willing to start it because the code is mostly done?
It doesn't make sense to start it
Right, okay,
until the code is done
okay.
at
So
this
that,
point.
So that
so
can shift.
that's 3,000 then that won't be spent this year. And that could be reallocated for something else if we wanted to. Building repairs, this is, the generic fund balance allocation for capital improvements, municipal repairs. So of that 100,000, 22 of it needs to go to finish out the project on the wall, which we know about, it's part of the contract. So that leaves about 80,000 still that we can use towards other projects.
Help me understand why the dump truck is here on this list of out of the 100K potentially.
So we could use some of this as a down payment for the dump truck, but we wouldn't use it for paying for the financing. It could go more towards the first payment. So the first payment, which is like a down payment, would be coming out of fund balance already, but we can increase the amount and then that would decrease the amount that we need to finance for the future years.
And when
And
the
then-
purchase was, oh, sorry.
No, and by doing that, it then decreases our expense on that
Right.
line, not just for next year, but then for the 3 years after that also. So there's a domino effect.
Understood. And is that how you had planned it when the purchase was first made, that a larger amount would come out of general fund
Fund
balance, excuse me?
We had planned for at least 35,000, which is the first payment or the down payment of a 5-year payment plan, to be paid towards a $200,000 truck.
So the 80,000 in fund balance that's still available for this fiscal year. You're saying a portion of it would go for the dump truck?
We could add more. I already have accounted that 35 is coming out. So that 80, if we don't end up spending it on other projects, if we wanted to make that 35 that's already been reserved up to say 45 or 50, we could.
Got it.
And that's dependent on the truck being ready
Right.
before the end of this fiscal year.
Yes.
And is there an update on that truck, that never-ending truck?
So as of March 2nd, it was built, but it was still at the Canadian border, waiting to come. I did email yesterday and have not gotten a response back yet. Once it arrives, it needs another, 6-8 weeks for the dump truck portion of the truck and the plow to be fitted, because only the chassis gets built at the factory. So they had said mid-April. If we could do May 31st, we're good to go with, using some of this fund balance to pay.
Got it. So Mike Turton might have some connections at the Canadian border. We can. No?
It's a good shot, though. Worth
Hey, it's worth
asking.
asking. All right, so basically, are we looking to put a list together, or are you guys putting a list together and then we sign off on it? Or how do you want to? I have my own little list that I've been keeping as I wander around the village.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all got a list of things that we would like to get fixed straight away. Michelle, well, what's the best way to share that? How long is your list, Joe?
I think for right now, it's just making everyone aware of what lines we need to focus on.
Yep.
And then, in smaller work groups, we can make plans of attack.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, that's fine. But that's the number, 80 grand's the number.
Yes.
Okay.
Traffic control street signs. I was hoping that we could order some parking signs before May 31st, but if we don't have the parking on Main Street residential defined, that's okay. Bugsy was asking for cones to share with the police department for next year. So instead of next year, we can have them order that this year. Fire building repairs, there's 3,500 left. We can use that towards some of the projects, the smaller projects that are going on like in their basement right now. That could go towards that fee. And then I assume like sidewalks and storm drains will be spent. And then fire and police retirement. So there's a $28,000 savings there. That can be allocated wherever we want if we have other projects. So it's a big savings because as we've been hiring, a lot of the newer hires are not part of the pension system.
Got it.
So it's been a significant change in the amount of the contributions from the police department to the pension system. And it's a good thing, but I didn't expect the level of turnover with the new hires not needing the pension. And I had budgeted appropriately for the past years, knowing that it was coming down. But last year it just came down way too much. So next year, I did a hand calculation by everybody's salaries as they stand now for an estimate again, which subject to
28,000.
change.
It's a chunk. Are there categories that we're restricted to with using this if it's coming out of these lines?
No.
Okay, good to know.
So basically, if I understand it correctly, we've got $80,000 of fund balance that we can spend on fund balance related items. Then there's these other items that you mentioned, which add up to 58,000. Some were in the budget. Some were in the budget, but won't be spent because of savings. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Oh.
Well,
It all comes out of the general fund
Right.
budget. So we do have the leniency where we can move it around within the general fund budget as needed.
Right, so it's 80 plus 58, really hypothetically speaking, is number that we could spend, whether we want to call it a budget or call it fund balance, doesn't matter, right? You just
Well-
wouldn't want to use fund balance for something that's an ongoing, reoccurring, like a person.
right. And I wouldn't say that it's quite 58 because, we've been talking about the catch basins, the drainage, the sidewalks, those things need to get done. They weren't done in the summer. We hope they're done in the spring. It's a big chunk that if they're not done, I would not count that. I would count the 28,000 as real savings, the street signs and the E-code. So 28, 3 and 3.
Well, I am leaning hard on the trustees who've thrown their hats in the ring for parking. I'm hoping that we can make some headway before the end of the budget year. Thank you,
Yeah.
We're
Catherine, for nodding.
meeting in the morning.
Excellent.
With the money for parking, the signs, we could still order signs for the
right.
residential parking for the side streets. If we have the money now, we could order them now. If they don't get put up for a year, so be it, but we could buy them now if the money's there.
You
Right.
just need the language.
As long as it doesn't change the language. Right? Yeah, go for it.
I would think the language for the side streets for the residential parking program would be whatever it is. I mean, that's not going to change. That's already legislative.
Resident sticker, residential parking
residential
only,
parking
or
only.
whatever it
Yeah.
is, must have sticker. We'll figure it out.
So they would have to be ordered. Michelle, what is it? They have to be ordered and delivered or just
Delivered
by the
May
20th?
by May 31st.
Okay. So if Eliza and I are meeting tomorrow, we had planned to put this on the agenda for April 6th.
Yes.
Do you want to move it up? If we give you good news after our meeting tomorrow?
I mean, if you feel like you're going to be ready before then, we're almost to April 6th. There's really only
True.
one week in between,
Okay.
2, I guess. Let us know how it goes. I'm delighted to see that additional 28. I mean, we all know the things that we need to, we have doors we need to replace at water and wastewater. There's a bunch of stuff that needs to get done. We can't do water and wastewater. Ugh. Well, there's still stuff that needs to get fixed. Plenty.
The list of getting things fixed and upgraded and repaired will far
Never
exceed
stop.
the amount of money that will ever happen short of somebody buying the village. Not to be blunt.
So,
It's quite
so
true.
those are the things we'll work towards, in the next 10 weeks, because that's really what we have by May 31st.
Let's go for it.
So on to the general fund expense budget. So this is an 8-page financial document. It's very detailed. It's last year's budget, the current year budget, and the proposed next year's budget.
I didn't have any questions on the first page.
So quick overview. So this is the general fund. This is where the taxes come into play for the expenses. So when we're looking at these, they're grouped sort of best that they can be by departments. That's why there's lines periodically throughout the document for subtotals by the department. When we're looking at the account number structure, the last 3 digits, if it starts with a 1, it's personal services. It's always going to be personal services. A 2 is always going to be equipment, something that has a useful life of over a year, usually a couple years. And 400 is everything else. They're typically called contractual, but really it just means any payment to a third-party vendor is going to come out of a 400 account. So these are the 3 codes that we use when talking about the budget. The majority that you see are 1s and 4s, personnel and contractual.
Why isn't there a 300? Just curious.
We can ask the state. I'm not sure.
Not up to us is the answer.
It might be in another fund, but we don't use it.
Okay.
And then when you get towards the end of the budget, things that start with 8, they're usually taxes, benefits, insurance, things like that. And these numbers are consistent in the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund.
Okay.
And the 6s and 7s are loans or, you know, outstanding debt?
Yes. Good
So-
catch. They're in the water and sewer right now, so I didn't mention them, but good catch.
So something I would like us to consider, and I know you've already started considering it, but since we're on draft version 1, whatever is in here that we could defer to fund balance, whether it's a capital related or something that's non-recurring, and definitely not something that's people related that compounds. So for instance, I think we have 18,000 of storm drains. We haven't spent that line for a couple of years. I know why we haven't, because of garbage, COVID, and all kinds of other issues. But that would seem like an item that the money's in the fund balance because we didn't spend it for a couple of years. Let's spend it out of fund balance and knock our spending down by the 18,000. And going forward, I would have to assume in the immediate future, that's the kind of thing that we're going to outsource anyway. With a
Okay, so for storm drains, it's 12,000. So the 18,000 that you mentioned includes 6,000 for personal services. So if that personal services isn't spent in storm drains, it's going to move to highway or sidewalks or snow or something like that. I have the highway salaries, highway department salaries are, I came up with a number, and then based on Bugsy's feedback of how many days they spend in each category, it's allocated out. So if we wanted to move some money to fund balance, it would only be 12,000. It couldn't be the full 18.
So the personal services is then what you're attributing to the person doing the work?
Correct.
Okay, got it. So whatever I mean, you know the line items and their association a lot better than I do. The only thing I do know is that I think we have to get the spending down, because I'm personally not comfortable, I'm one of 5, not comfortable using a maximum tax levy.
Neither am I.
No, I'm not either.
So whatever we got to do to get it down, and if that's one way to do it, so be it. Those are the low-lying fruits, I guess.
So if the work's going to be outsourced, I'd be comfortable doing that. If
Okay.
we did the work in-house, then now you're moving the price of concrete, the price of a wrought iron storm drain grate, or like little things that are really operating. They're like supplies and materials. But if we're going to be outsourcing this work, then I'd be more comfortable moving it to fund balance, because then it's a true capital project that somebody else is doing for the village.
I think both from a finance perspective and from a practical perspective, we have to do some of that to get caught up on that's been deferred.
Okay.
And if we have the funds, let's get caught up as quick as possible.
Yes.
We could even start doing that now this year, and then, next year. I don't know if I would move the full 12. There's still going to be some kind of minor repairs that the highway crew would have to do. But
move as much as you can in as
Okay.
many categories as you can.
Mhm.
So we can get, one, the tax rate down, and two, get as much stuff done. Because there's money in fund balance that's been there and accumulated because stuff hasn't been spent.
Correct.
So that to me is a logical way to
Yeah.
spend it. You know, it was budgeted, wasn't spent, went to fund balance. Now let's just take it back and let's start spending it. You know, as long as we stay within reasonable accounting standards, which we're not
Mhm.
even close. You know, the auditors are not going to say anything if we took 325,000, 330 out. They're going to still say, you guys are exceeding whatever you need to exceed. You're a AAA rated village.
We're not bond rated, so we'll just pretend that
Right,
didn't
but
happen.
in my book,
I know what you mean, though.
Yes, if
Um,
you look at that fiscal report card thing that
Yes.
you showed me, we're up at the top of the list.
We are.
Right.
Okay. So as we move through, I thought that maybe we would do this expenses in broad strokes by department. And then if people have individual questions on lines, be more than happy to walk through them. But I thought maybe we would do department or chunk, as we go. So the first one is the Board of Trustees, and please interrupt me if I go too fast. The Board of Trustees, it's personal services. It is what it is. It's the stipends that have been set. The board can change them. We haven't decided at this point. We're keeping them steady. So it's the same budget as last year. Contractual, out of here, it's 2,300 because you have 2,000 for Zoom. And then, miscellaneous supplies and computer support is the emails, and if we got a computer for the boardroom to do the Teams or the share, things like that, would be 25 a month. The next topic is the Justice Court. So they submitted, Judge Costello submitted his budget. He did ask for a personnel raise, as we've talked about that, for his staff, and everything else that he asked for is in line with the things from the prior year. The next is the mayor, deputy mayor line, miscellaneous contractual, telephone. Next is accountant and auditor. We have to pay an external auditor. I don't think we have a signed contract for next year yet, or we have one more year, but I'm assuming it's going to be a 5% increase. They've done anywhere from 3 to 5% in the past years. Accountant, personal services, that would be me, and then contractual. So every other year, we need to pay 2,800 to 3,000 for a software that does what's called a GASB statement for OPEB. It has to be done. It's a state requirement, and it's done every 2 years. So this line will constantly go up and down by 2,800 every other year. Next category is budget officer. That's a stipend. The budget and notices. This is anytime we advertise in a paper, comes out of this line. Village clerk department, personal services, contractual, and the website. So for the website, what I don't have included, which we probably should, is we talked about text messaging in some capacity for alerting. I don't have that in the budget because I don't think that we have definitive numbers, but that's probably something that we should try and add.
I think that Eliza has a number on that, so let's put that on the list of follow-ups.
Okay. I think
And I think
maybe-
too that Vinny gave numbers for that as well. No, not Vinny.
Anthony.
Anthony. I don't know why.
estimated maybe like 500. I think it was a smaller amount.
Mhm.
So, which we might even be able to cover. So we used to have to pay $400 a year to have our .gov domain, which we haven't paid in the past 2 years, and I'm not sure if they're going to continue that. But if it stays being free, then that $400 would just cover the text messaging and then a little extra, and it wouldn't be a big impact to the budget. Attorney, there's attorney contractual, which is CMR and any other attorneys we need for special projects. Prosecuting is the law firm that prosecutes for the courts for us. And then engineer.
Michelle, excuse me a second. Why does that drop by that chunk? The prosecuting contractual?
So originally, we had thought that the prosecuting attorney would be 8 hours a month. And and I know it's due to COVID, but it's coming significantly lower than I'm comfortable dropping it to 6 hours a month. Sometimes I see a bill only for 3 hours, maybe 5 hours, and it's
Okay.
You know, we're through January, which is probably actually through December, we were at 2,000. So I'm comfortable reducing that.
Okay,
And then right now, CMR is proposing increased rates. So although the attorney contractual expenses have been less in the past and on trend to be less, he's raising those rates. So I'm not comfortable dropping that line to meet the current expenses.
yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm concerned about engineer and architect contractual,
Mhm.
whether that's enough for the amount of engineering work that we're looking at with all the capital projects we need to deal with.
Okay, so this would be anything for that's not CHIPS eligible, assuming that CHIPS
Okay,
engineering
okay,
would come out of the resurfacing CHIPS budget.
okay. That makes me feel better then.
And this 12,000 is one of the 3 areas that I already thought we could move to fund balance. So this is 12,000. If you wanted to raise it, we could. I just, without having a firm, I don't know what a good number would be.
What, do you remember when, I'm sorry that I can't remember the name of the firm that was last on
P&D?
retainer, P&D. Do you remember what that cost was? Was that the 20?
So they charge us by project. And I think one project was 6,000, another one might have been 10,000. They were actually quite expensive.
Okay, I did nudging phone calls today and I'm going to do more tomorrow for the firms that we sent the RFP to see if we can get a better sense for budgeting purposes.
Okay.
So I would definitely move that to fund balance. I mean, if they're going to be doing so-called architect engineering for capital related, it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And one-off projects.
Correct.
So moving it to fund balance, assuming that they're going to be charging us by project per project basis instead of like a retainer. Okay. Records management. So again, I put in the 3,000 for E-code. And then if periodically we get a shredder to clean up the storage in the basement, that comes out of here. We've had records management help in the past, maybe a college student helping with the filing. I've taken that out of the budget. It's only 1,500. And right now I think there's other issues to address in the basement first before we hire someone to help file for us. We could add it in, but we hadn't used it in 2 years, so I took it out. Shared services is a bigger department. So this is the personal services for shared staff, Ann and Karen, potential part-time hire in Village Hall to supplement with Ann and Karen.
Right, and part of that, the line that you were just talking about having had eliminated the intern.
Mhm.
We were thinking of shifting that a bit to make that possible.
And so the rest of the shared services is the basic stuff: heating, electric, telephone, copy machine, things that we need to run an office. As an overall note, for heating, gas, diesel, all of those lines have gone up. I'd have to assume that the current unknown state of pricing is going to continue. So I have raised those lines significantly, which has impacted the overall budget. You know, last year I assumed usage, you know, at 2.75 a gallon. and I'm up to 4.5. And maybe that's high, but I really, you know, you hear on the news that gas and oil's at over $5 a gallon. Even with our discount, 4.50 might be in the near future.
I think you have
Before-
to plan for that uncertainty.
If things go back down and stabilize before we adopt the budget, you know, that might be another potential cost savings. But I estimate by usage, 3-year history of what's been used throughout the village on, you know, whether it's electric, oil, gas, all those things, and then take an average per gallon to come up with a number. For electric, we're in the CCA. All the village accounts are on the CCA except for village lighting. So we are pretty stable there with a locked-in rate. We're not feeling the effects of the fluctuation in electric.
Why is village lighting not part of the CCA?
Street lighting, right?
Street lighting, yes.
But why?
It's not a building. I don't know the exact reason, but I think it's because it's on a street. It's not in a building.
But where does it gets metered, right?
All the street lights come on one bill. I don't know if it's on demand or how that works. I just know that it's not on the CCA.
Okay, seems like something to ask about.
You know, if the
That's a
street,
lot of spending for electricity. Sorry, Joe.
you know, if the street lights are on a timer or are they on sensors?
I don't know the answer to that.
Don't know. I think they're sensors.
I believe they're on a sensor.
Okay, we should probably take a look at the ones down by the dock. This morning, they were on at 8, the ones by the boat club. So if they're on a
Cold lights?
sensor, that probably just needs to be adjusted. If they're on a timer, then we should probably adjust it.
Okay, I'll tell Bugsy.
And that would be a Central Hudson
Yeah, that's,
problem though.
Yeah, that's Central Hudson. Well, depending on how they're activated, if it's our sensor. I mean,
I doubt that it's ours. I'm pretty sure it would be Central Hudson's.
Oh, no, it's the bandstand where we control the sensor. Sorry.
Where we have the timer, yeah.
okay, so maybe we could take a look at that.
Okay. In shared services, municipal building repairs, I have 295 and 5 for Village Hall. This is a 300,000 of fund balance that we've allocated for capital projects until we identify exactly what projects. This is what we did last year because it's on village-wide things. We put it in municipal repairs.
Good.
The next one is generic items, so I'll go line by line. So unallocated insurance, that is our general liabilities insurance, village-wide. Water and sewer have a portion. I've reached out to Kieran. He should have an estimate, hopefully by the end of the week. He's been asking the companies for proposals. I have 15% increase here right now. Another potential place that it could come down, but it did go up about 10 or 11% last year. Municipal dues, that's our NICOM membership. They've held that flat for years. Judgments and claims, based on trends, it used to be 5,000. I brought it down to 2,500, which is a typical deductible if we have a claim. Taxes on property, we shouldn't have any expenses here because Hudson House pays the taxes. Actually, I'm sorry, I have to put an expense here and then move it to revenue, but it'll be a wash. So we pay the taxes to Haldane and Phillipstown for 5 New Street, and then Hudson House reimburses us. So I'll increase it both on the revenue and the expense side. Contingent account, it's 3,500 right now. This is just exactly what it is, a contingent account. You know, if something's off balance by $2 or $3, I take it out of here, and that's why it's never a flat number. But this is basically an emergency account to have.
And you said in the past it's been used for storm response? plowing?
So the last time it was used, so in the 5 years, it's only been used once, and it was used the first year that we got dumped with a lot of snow and we needed snow removal off of the sidewalks. So we used that to help fund that. And then since then, we've put in snow removal contractual, which is another caveat. If
That's
you,
right, I'd forgotten that. Okay.
if we actually use this for something that we can prepare for in the future, we do that. So page number 3. This whole page is for the police department. The personal services is based off of the PBA contract, their hire dates, their steps, longevities, shift differential, how many holidays and weekends there are. I take an average salary. I assume that they all work an equal number of shifts, not reality, but the best that I can do to get a number. And we come up here with 351. So Larry this year has asked for additional walking tours, which is roughly in total $13,000. We always have a walking tour when C Streak is here, and C Streak usually offsets that cost. But Larry thought that it would be beneficial to have someone, an officer, on more weekends in more tourist, months. So maybe through the summer, not just in the fall.
So it's a larger number than when it was just C Streak. And
Yes,
C Streak would cover the cost.
yes. So this was one of Larry's wishes. So I put it in the budget. If that's not something that the board wants to go through with, that's another area that we could take out if we wanted to. The rest of his lines are all contractual. It's court dates and training days. 4 are contractual, but up to 6. So I budget for the 6, but if they don't do the extra 2, it won't get paid out. But the walking tours are the only place here that we would have some wiggle room.
What are super holidays?
Christmas, Thanksgiving,
Christmas, New Year's, yeah.
a holiday that they now get paid double time for.
I see.
So going back to the walking tours,
Mhm.
was this something that came up in conversations last year and maybe the year before, that there was a need because of the realities of what happens on the weekends?
I think in our conversations with him, there's just a lot more people up and down Main Street.
Okay.
We can have Larry comment further before we make a decision if we'd like.
I called him on that this afternoon and asked the same question, Joe, and I understood that there had been a line for walking tours for quite some time in the budget, but it had not been used as much as it has in recent years because of the heavy tourism flow.
I don't know about that. We've always had some walking tours in the
Right.
budget to coincide with C Streak. In the more recent years, we have asked C Streak to cover those walking tours. But I don't know for certain in the past 5 years if we've ever budgeted for half a year worth of walking tours.
Not for half a year's worth, that's right. He had some,
Yes,
and this year he has asked for more
yes,
based on the last 2 summers.
yes.
Maybe we could take a look at that.
Also, if we have meters that only the police can access the information on, unless we get the parking enforcement person who can access that information, would the walking tour person cover that?
We anticipate that we will have a parking enforcement officer.
I know, but remember we talked about the software that only the police have access to on the meters?
Oh, yes, and I was not clear on what the answer to that question was. So
Yeah.
that's another one that needs to be confirmed with Larry, whether the parking enforcement officer will be able.
To access that information. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Crossing guards, it goes by the amount of school days, parking enforcement. So this is half a year for the whole summer and fall into November, I think it's May through November roughly. Equipment. So in the police equipment here, this 19,000, 15 of it is a placeholder for what the village wants to accomplish, whether we want to go with cameras down at the bandstand, if we want to do body cameras, if it's a new vehicle, some kind of equipment payment. So Larry typically has one payment of a vehicle in his budget for the past couple years, the equivalent of roughly 12 to 15 grand. So this number is usually in the operating budget, but it can be used for whatever the village board and the department want. And those are the 3 items that have been talked about.
Is it enough for the body cam request?
It would be enough, I think, for one of them. So body cameras was 30,000 for 5 years, paying some of the equipment up front.
Mhm.
So it wouldn't be an even split, 30 divided by 5. And then the cameras at the bandstand and maybe Mayor's Park or something, we could probably do 2 or 3 locations upgraded.
Just for board and public information, I attended the State of the County address last Thursday, and the money for body cameras that was requested by Sheriff Langley has been released from a sub-contingency fund. So the deputies will be wearing body cameras in the new year for the county. So our colleagues on the road will have body cameras for your consideration.
Okay.
And they're funded through the county, or are they funded through some kind of grant?
Some of them, I'm not positive, Joe. There was talk about a Homeland Security grant. I'm not sure where the money ultimately came from, but it is out of the county budget. What fed the county budget, I'm not positive, but I believe it may have been Homeland Security. The problem that we have in the village is that our department is too small to qualify for the equipment grants, and that's where we get stuck.
Okay.
So right now that 15,000, I guess if we're talking about moving stuff to fund balance, that could be. So if it's the equipment for cameras, or for cameras at the bandstand, we can move that down. If it's the body camera equipment, the majority of the body cameras is more the storage than the equipment itself. So that would be a reoccurring 5-year cost that I wouldn't be comfortable moving. So I guess in future conversations, we'd have to decide what that 15,000, if that should stay in the budget, and if it does, what it should be used for, and then we can figure out if we can move it to fund balance or not.
Okay. I'd like to hear more about the body camera concept.
I asked Larry if he could join the call this evening, and he could not. So we didn't get to finish that conversation in the last time. So we can ask him to join our next session if you'd like.
Sure. Or if he wants to send us a memo, just outlining the pluses and minuses. Okay.
So also with this 15,000, if it moved towards the body cameras, we wouldn't need the full 15,000, and then we could eliminate it from the budget, or use half of it to do maybe one video camera somewhere else, and then that could easily go to fund balance. So for this conversation, I think at this point, it's safe to move 7,000 to fund balance. I think that would be okay. Vehicle repairs, services, gas, materials. And then a big chunk of the lines here are uniform allowance, which is PBA contractual. So that's more than 2/3 of the page. They're all 600. If you've been here for 3 years or more, new hires get 700, and then 650, and then it goes down to the 600, which is why you'll see a fluctuation in the amounts. Any other questions on the police department?
So well, actually one. So we do have, I think that you said it already, but I'm gonna ask the question again to make sure it's in my head. We do have a car payment in that chunk under equipment.
No, so
No,
that
we do not.
15,000 has typically been a car payment, but for this year, keeping the same amount, it's choosing what to use it for if we.
Okay, yep, I got it. You said that already. Sorry.
Well, the three choices were body cameras,
Cameras.
vehicle, or surveillance cameras.
Correct.
All right.
If I remember correctly.
Locational cameras.
Page 4, traffic signs. So it sounds like even if we can order some this year, we still might need some more next year. But if we can get a good chunk of them ordered this year, that 4,000 can come down. Like I said, Bugsy asked for cones. I'll have him order those this year. And then that 4,000 could, I would assume, be cut in half. So long as we actually get the signs ordered. Is it safe to assume we can order them?
I would say so.
Yeah, I think so.
I'll move that to 2,000. And we'll have to talk to Bugsy and make sure how long it takes to produce signs.
And then just, maybe I think this came up in one of the other conversations. It was either a Bugsy question or a police question or both. Just verifying the signs around the village are all accurate and in place, like where you can park, where you can't park, no U-turns, all that kind of stuff. There was an issue on, was it Rock Street or something? There was a question about, is it legitimate?
On the curve.
Not.
That was specific to the striping on Rock Street.
Okay.
Marie and Fran, trustees Murphy and Early, did do walkthroughs with Larry. And there is a list of the parking signs and other signs to be modified and ordered.
Okay.
So we need to follow up with it.
And that list is present?
Jeff has it, I think. Yeah,
I would have to look. I'm sure. I can
somewhere.
find it
It's here somewhere. I'm sure.
Okay.
Okay. Next department is fire department. Most of these lines are for, building type maintenance. It includes the gasoline for the trucks, the electric to the fire siren, in the fire siren line. Although I've been told it's not actually for the siren, it's building monitoring and a fire monitoring software. They've just always been paid out of there. Whether it's a siren on their phone or a siren on a pole, it's still an alert that there's a fire. So I paid out of the siren line. Then there is the fire service award. So these are the fees for having the program, the administration. The contribution to LoSAP is in the benefits line at the back of the budget. And then fire protection service. This is the amount that the fire company requests to provide fire protection to the village, Phillipstown, and Nelsonville. The village collects money from Phillipstown and Nelsonville, and then we make a contribution with them and we pay it to the fire department. They submit us a budget in October. For the budget, I assumed that because they asked for 4% last year, that they would again ask for 4%. But if we only wanted to budget for 2% or 3%, that's up to the board. It's hard to assume because they're not going to ask until October. But if we can at least make a guess right now, it'll help, which is why sometimes the line is over a little bit, because they've asked for a request that wasn't always budgeted for. And then it was subsequently granted because we're on a lag. So I have 4% in, I have half of 4% because it's only one payment that's affected. So really dropping it to 2% or 3%, it doesn't really impact the budget. It's just a conversational piece at this point.
So not a crazy idea. Now that the relationship between the village and the fire company is very participatory, Maybe it's not a bad idea if the village liaison and the fire company chief and president got together twice a year and just sat down and said, how's it going? You know, these are what we've been spending on. How are you guys doing? Is there anything that you're doing differently, et cetera, rather than wait for the once a year kind of thing? Also a way to vet some problems. Just, you know, a fluid dialogue on a more regular basis. I know that wasn't necessarily always possible because of whatever, but they
Well-
seem to be extremely cooperative and reasonable in our, I mean,
Yeah.
just every time I've spoken to them about some of the issues that we've had, they've been very helpful. So I think the relationship is as good as you're gonna get.
I think the relationship has improved immensely, and it's a show of good faith. I'm absolutely up for that mid-year check-in.
And, you know, flush out some issues and,
Yeah.
you know, I'd have to assume they're probably, I know they're very happy with the new boiler. And I would have to assume it's gonna save some money, you know, granted, the rates have gone through the roof, but once things stabilize a little bit, there should be some savings there. The old boiler was a disaster.
Yeah.
I would ask that if you do that, so they submit, as part of their budget request, they submit financials where they are year to date.
Okay.
If at that meeting you get them, I have spreadsheets of all their requests. Maybe not the expenses, I have them on paper. And then we could just compare so that, you know, it's great to have conversations, but you know, if something gets left out, at least it's on the numbers and people are like, oh, what's going on here? Is this going to lead to an expense later on and so forth? I'm all about the paper.
Yep.
So the next line, control of animals. This is the firehouse too. Or if we actually need to bring in someone for, I think they've paid maybe for raccoon disposal or something in the past. It's small, it's $540 a year.
Do we, the town covers the dog warden salary, is that right? Not us?
We don't pay anything for that.
No, it must be town then. I
This
thought
is
that's what this
mostly
was when
pest
I looked at it. Sorry?
I was gonna say, this is mostly pest control, right? This is the Terminex.
This would be Terminex or like if a rabid raccoon, if we needed to properly dispose or something like that,
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think Terminex goes in there quarterly and.
to the firehouse.
Firehouse.
Building inspector, I know that this is in limbo right now. So I just assumed that however our building inspector was paid in the past, same hours, same rate, I carried it forward. I know that there may be an interim agreement with the town, which then we wouldn't have the associated taxes, you know, FICA payroll taxes to go along with it. But in the meantime, I think we should leave it as a personal services line and not flip it to contractual.
I think that's smart until we make decisions. And obviously what we pay out on a month by month basis with the town until we do have it sorted out, we're not going to be paying Charlotte at that time.
So then we'll just do budget adjustments to move a portion of that salary if the village does hire to the contractual line next year. Registrar vital stats, that's for the birth certificates. Page 5 is the highway department. The highway department has several sub-departments throughout the budget. Highway street maintenance is where the bulk of their expenses are, the most generic category. It's not my choice to break it out like this. The state asks to have highway, you know, snow, transportation, sidewalks for pedestrians. These are all state categories. And when the auditors come, they do some analysis for our financial statements based on these categories.
How did you arrive at the proposed 261,000 for resurfacing?
I took the CHIPS money and added 4,000, the proposed CHIPS amount.
Okay.
So I assume that our CHIPS funding for next year would be the exact same as last year for a placeholder. It usually doesn't go down. In the proposed state budget, they were adding money to CHIPS. So I would assume that it would go up, and then if the revenue goes up, I'll make the expense go up to match the same.
Okay.
You
Thanks.
see all of the gas, oil and diesel doubling?
Because of
Wow.
the
Wow.
price.
No,
Uh, I brought diesel down a little bit because we don't have the garbage trucks to take the diesel anymore, so that actually went down a little bit. But they're still expensive.
no.
It's something we can revisit. I'm open to it.
I mean, I just don't know how I don't know how you can
No.
plan right now with everything that's so unstable and the numbers where they are. I think that's better to plan to spend it or not.
Yeah.
So for the highway equipment, right now it's 45, which is 40,000 for an actual financed payment of the dump truck, including interest, and 5,000 in miscellaneous equipment. I would say, I know Joe wants to move this to fund balance, but some of this equipment is not always large things. Like this includes like a $200 lawnmower, a weed whacker. They use a lot of basic equipment, not, and maybe a part for the Bobcat or something like that. So I'm not comfortable moving that. Bugsy did ask for a stump grinder, which is not in the budget. And because I don't really know where we ended on the conversation with that. And I think it was to not do it.
I think that we need to look at our intermunicipal loans of equipment. We've had 2 other highway departments offer to loan us equipment like that. It seems crazy to buy a piece of equipment that we use 3 times a year or whatever it might be.
And for that reason, I don't have it in the budget. It's just a big ask that was, as we're going through this, I'm trying to call out the big asks from the departments that came out of the department meetings, and that was one of them.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, when I mentioned pulling equipment, I kind of meant the bigger stuff, not
Yeah.
necessarily the little stuff.
Mhm. So, okay. Education, I increased that a little bit. We talked about sending the staff for some training, highway courses, things like that, snow plowing. And then they all have vision care and a clothing allowance, and that rounds out the highway department. So like I mentioned before, I took the highway department estimated salaries based on hours worked, average overtime, best guesstimate for snow, came up with a total number and divided it out amongst highway, snow, sidewalk, storm drains, and street cleaning. We used to allocate it through garbage and recycling, but now that that is a contract, those lines will be empty. So if we wanted to make any changes to the personal services lines on allocation, we can, but just know that that's the amount that needs to be paid out to an employee. It's just how we sliced it for the budget. Snow removal equipment. This is usually for plow pieces and things that happen during the storms, plow guides, things like that. Contractual, 12,000. That would be if we needed to hire in a third party to help with snow removal. You could see 2 years ago, it was a very high number. There was a lot of snow. We used a lot of outsourcing. This year, we've barely used any. We didn't do any outsourcing. I think this contractual is for salt and things like that, of that nature. So this 12,000, assume 10 or 11 of it is for outsourcing. That could be a number that if we wanted to reduce, we could, or we can leave it.
Well, the only thing that makes me nervous is next year we get another of those big storms. I'd rather leave the amount where it is and have the capacity to shift that money elsewhere at the end of next budget season if we haven't spent it, than not have it there. We've brought it down quite a lot.
Mhm.
No, to play
I remember
devil.
one of the storms being like $17,000, right?
By the time we
Wow.
by the time we get to this time next year, we'll know whether.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to play devil's advocate, now that the guys don't have to do garbage, if it's a garbage day, the day after snow, they don't necessarily get to do much. They should have a little bit more resources to, I mean, obviously, if you're gonna get 30 inches of snow, that's gonna tax everybody. But maybe it's something that we prune a little bit.
Well, I mean, we've pruned down 6,000.
Right, but we only spent 1,000.
We-
Just throwing
we
it
didn't
out
get-
there.
Yeah, I don't know. We didn't get the snow this year. It worries me that if we got a big storm and we needed, or two big storms and we needed that backup, we need the backup. Michelle, if there were a snow event and we did not have enough money in contractual to pay, what would we do? Is that something that would come out of fund balance? What would you do in that case?
So at that point, assuming it's December, we're about halfway through the year. We might have an idea of other things that might have some savings. Or we might at that point say, you know what, we really wanted E-code or something. We really wanted those cameras, but we have not paid for them yet. Well, at this point, we need to pay for snow removal. That 6,000 needs to move to next year's budget or something like that.
So if we did trim down, as Joe's suggesting, and worst case scenario, we had 2 or 3 giant storms, we'd look at other lines.
You know, we have right 3,000 in an emergency contingency line,
Right.
which was done one
Right.
time before. Hopefully gas and oil come down and, you know, that could be a savings. It's just really analyzing where we are.
I'd forgotten about that 3,000 line.
If you look where we were 2 years ago, we spent almost $30,000. So
Yeah, and as a process, all I'm saying is we're draft version 1. We're identifying items that could go to fund
Yeah.
balance to come out of the budget. But we're also identifying items that can either be eliminated or pruned. When we have that list and we fine tune the revenues, we'll go back to the pruning. And we may not prune, we may add to, we may delete, but
Right.
all it is identifying things that I think are something that needs further discussion.
Agreed.
Getting to the point where we all want to be in the end, which is still be determined. So that's kind of all I'm thinking as a process.
Sounds good.
I like process.
So are we leaving it? Are we leaving it
Yeah.
with a star?
Leave it as a.
I would leave it for now.
Asterisk.
What did you say, Joe?
Asterisk.
Asterisk.
Yeah.
I can't say that word, so I call it a star.
That was good.
Okay, so street lights. This is lighting throughout the village. The big one is, we talked about street lighting on up and down Main Street on the poles, those not part of the CCA. And then the street lights at Haldane / Butterfield, those are the blinking yellow lights, the traffic lights to slow down. We have to pay power for those lights.
Where is the one for the school?
Coming in by the tennis courts?
yeah, on 90 by the tennis courts.
They're both on 90.
Yeah.
I have never noticed a blinking light.
Butterfield is as you're coming around the curve.
Butterfield I've seen, have not noticed the one by the tennis courts. Okay,
And then
maybe I was driving too fast.
the streetlights for the bandstand, which is mostly the Christmas lights, and the subway, which we run a generator under there, if, you know, to prevent flooding. Sidewalks, so 15,000 for maintenance and repair. I increased it with the thought that, you know, without garbage, we were going to tackle more sidewalks next year.
Great.
Next one, off-street parking meters. So the more metered spaces that you have, the more income you bring, the more fees you're going to have. Is roughly, with Park Mobile, what I've been seeing, it's roughly 13% of the income. So this number is exactly that. So if we end up adding more parking revenue attributed to a meter, then this number would subsequently go up a little bit too. Parks And recreation. So the rec department submitted their budget. Some conversations were back and forth and we're kind of in limbo. They pretty much asked for the same amounts that they had last year, with the idea to allocate among projects. They talked about some big capital projects, I think resurfacing the basketball court. So that's something that we would have to plan for eventually, but that is nowhere in this budget right now. I don't know if that's something that needs to be talked about more. Eventually, that would probably be a fund balance project. They wanted to look into grants, but I don't think the CFA would be the answer, based on how competitive it is for parks. But that was their big ask, was to resurface the basketball courts from my conversations.
I sat in with a couple of them along with a sports surface consultant that I've used before, just to have a vague conversation for talking points. There's a lot of different scenarios and options for that spot. I think they're a little ways off from something more definitive.
Mhm.
And I think it's a little more complex than just paving the basketball court.
Okay.
There's setbacks, there's poles. It's a bigger conversation.
Okay.
Not insurmountable, but just a little bit more than just paving the basketball court.
Okay. So then here in recreation personal services, so we talked about, possibly eliminating a specific seasonal recreation lawn person who handles the lawns, and making it a part-time all year round person. So these numbers went up because the hourly rate increase on this, potential new hire. So the thought was you eliminate the summer help and you eliminate the part-time seasonal recreation, and then those two salaries help offset a full-time, an all year round part-time person. So that salary is here for
A piece of it is here.
a piece of it. And the rest of it is, divvied up between highway, snow, and everything else.
And that also is a state driven. The state wants to know the lawn care category.
They want to know recreation. And then furthermore, they want to know dockside very specifically.
Well, of course, yeah. Thanks.
It's recreation. I'm going to lump all the boards in together. So you have the historic board, the zoning board, code update, and planning. I assume you take code update out of it, that the other boards, they meet twice a month. Karen does those meetings, 6 hours per meeting to both do the meeting, do the minutes, do the prep work and everything associated with that. That's how I come up with that 3,000 for all three of those boards. What's not in here, which I'm still trying to get a definitive number from HDRB, is what exactly they need for next year to finish their design standards.
I know that it's on there. I did ask them for follow-up and it's on their agenda for their next meeting to discuss. That just needs to be put to bed.
I know the total amount of the contract to be paid out, trying to figure out how much work has actually been done, which could drive the percentage, the progress payment we could make this year before the 31st. So that'll be an increase to expenses. And then code update, it's just a balance of the NYSERDA grant, assuming that there's going to be some more public hearings. And celebrations is mixed in the middle of it. So I hopped on the call right as you guys were talking about doing a celebration in September. So this I have it at 2,000 right now. Most of the July 4th or Community Day was driven by donations, maybe a little advertising on our end. So I'm not sure if the board wants to take that same approach. And if that's the case, then we don't need to increase the celebration. The other topic is the senior picnic. which also sometimes was donated and sometimes the village paid for certain aspects of it. Go back to a senior picnic, then that would be paid as celebrations. If the village board did any kind of employee appreciation dinner, which has been moved away from. And the contribution, if there's a Memorial Day parade, I believe it's to the VFW, the village makes a contribution towards that. So that all comes out of contractual for celebrations. Usually don't spend the 3,000, so I dropped it to 2, but I don't know what plans the board.
I mean, I think,
has for next year.
I think continuing as it has been on a donation-driven
Mhm.
event is the right way to go, sponsorship and donation.
Okay.
Others?
So next page, got 2 pages left in the general fund, not so bad. Still garbage and recycling, there's a lot of lines with history, but moving forward, it's just garbage contractual. I probably should break it out and attribute some to recycling contractual, but right now it's the Royal contract. So I took the contract, divided by 12, and then we signed the contract in March. So the last 3 months of next year, I upped it by 3% because the contract will renew, come up with the 218. And that assumes no additional brush. It's everything that was talked about in the contract. If there's any changes to the contract that have come up so far or come up, while in the next couple weeks, just let me know and I can adjust the number if we need to.
Okay.
Street cleaning, that's the highway salaries. Community beautification, 2,000. This is for flags, sometimes for planters, miscellaneous small items to spruce up the village. Rec usually handles some planting out of their budget too. But we've usually spent no more than 2,000, so I kept it at 2,000. It's only 600 spent right now. But Bugsy hasn't ordered flags yet. He usually does that in April, May.
Not a big budget item, but just a pin in something that we weren't able to do last year is we have the memorial plaque sitting in Jeff's office, not the memorial plaque, but the honorarium plaque for first responders that was to have been installed with the new tree at the corner of Main and Chestnut. So that in the spring, we should figure out what the vision for that was for installation and get that out.
Is that
And
something?
I just got the final bill on that too. We had paid a deposit, or David paid a deposit. For
And
that.
was it envisioned to be installed on a stone, or how was the previous board imagining installing it
That was the vision.
on a stone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe we could ask our congressman for some flags. I think we did that at the school once. Take a
Sure.
nice photo up at the water.
Okay, couple hundred. Sure.
Can't hurt. Build a relationship.
And he does have on his website, actually, now that you say that, there is a spot to request flags.
Okay.
Catherine, next time he's having dinner, ask him for a flag before he orders dessert.
Storm drains, we talked about that, moving the 12,000 to fund balance, if we can agree that that's something that's going to actually be contracted out.
Why is there nothing under supplies? Because those supplies would be provided by the contractor?
Yeah, so we had 4,000 and 8,000. I just lumped them together into contractual.
Okay.
It was kind of on the same page that a lot of this would be contracted out.
Yep.
The tree board. So the tree board has requested for both this year and next year to increase their request. Where they had gotten, over a $50,000 grant, they used over 2.5 years. It did a lot of the tree pits on Main Street, but it also did a lot of pruning. Half the grant was pruning. So they want to keep up with it, and they want to tackle what the grant wasn't able to have it stay manageable. And to accomplish that, Jen's basically asking to double her budget. Her budget was 5,000. She's asking for 10,000 now.
And so that 10 is divided between those two lines, removal and maintenance.
Yes.
And
And
then,
then she's not asking for an increase for replacement. She usually buys clearance and then rehabs the trees back
right,
to life.
and you had the possibility of tree pruning in this year as part of that 80,000. So that we would in effect be giving two chunks to deal with spring work and fall work. Yeah, that makes sense.
They're very thorough, the tree advisory people.
Yeah, they're really dedicated.
Wow.
And we're lucky. It's, when you visit other municipalities our size and see streets devoid of trees, you realize how lucky we are and what a public amenity it is to have shade trees. So I'm grateful.
You
for
could
that.
just get the electric wires out of their way.
I know.
So then the last page is all benefits. So it's state retirement and police. We talked about how the police is coming down. Now, overall, both police and employees are coming down, not just from attrition and changeover, new hires, change in salary, change in tiers. A big thing is the change in tiers. So new hires, people hired within the past, say 6 or 7 years, if they've never had municipal experience before, they're in a brand new tier, which in some years, the contribution has been half of what we've had to pay for employees in an older tier. And then on top of that, the anticipated rates for next year have dropped. New York State pension is doing well, it typically does well. So they've decided to drop their rates on what the municipalities have to pay significantly. So all those factors have dropped our retirement contribution significantly. Fireman Service Award. So this amount is the retirement program, like the LoSAP for the volunteer firefighters. Each year, PenFlex does an actuarial report that makes an assumption on what they believe we should contribute to keep the pension, their pension and their benefits fully funded. So we, for a little history, this number was up in the 60s a couple years ago, did a revamp of the program. And now it's been hovering more around the 30s, 35 range. Social Security and Medicare are directly tied to all those personal services lines. It adds them all up and puts on between the two of them 7.65%. Workers' comp, I have an 8% increase budgeted in here pending Kieran's estimates. So those are more lines that may come down. Last year, due to COVID, that New York State paid any unemployment insurance or claims that we had. But I put another 1,500 in sometimes we have to pay for one employee who's seasonal. Other than that, there's only been one other time that the village has been required to pay unemployment. Medical insurance. So this is NISHIP. This is based on the premium rates that the state sets every January. Since we do a budget mid-year, I do an estimate on what they might raise those rates in January and factor that in. So this year they raised it 12%. Usually it's somewhere between 2 to 8%. So I think I factored in an average. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that I did the rate increase a little higher because 12% was a shock this year, when the highest one before that was only 8%. So in the medical insurance, I assume the status quo for everybody, that nobody's changing. And aside from one person, if one person on a single plan moves to a family plan, I have that in there because those premiums are different. But other than that, it doesn't account for, if we hire a full-time person mid-year, not that it's in the budget, but we don't have that budgeted for here. It's a pretty tight number. Then dental and eye insurance, and then the whole total, including fund balance projects, is 2.9 million right now.
There is one dental policy that drops by half. Is that a shift from a family plan to an individual plan? What would
Yes.
account for that? Okay.
So, Michelle, on the medical,
Yep,
the current employees pay 15% of the premium, correct?
correct.
I think that's something that we should take a look at for new hires going forward,
Okay.
as part of the whole handbook review. And it's the 15%, it's not so much the number, it's the plan is expensive.
Yeah.
A family plan is like 33,000, I think.
Correct.
So it's a pretty expensive plan. It's a good plan, but it's a costly plan. So I think it's something that we should take a look at for the future. And
Okay.
then out of that 192,000, is about half of that retiree health insurance? That appears somewhere else,
No, retirees are in here.
like half, isn't it?
I don't have the totals. Give me one quick minute and I could total it real quick.
Or ballpark, you don't have to give me an exact number.
Yeah, half might be a little high, but
Yeah, half is high, so 40. It's about 35%,
Okay, so 35%
chunk.
retirees.
just in the general fund. The retirees percentage will change fund by fund.
Got it. Okay, okay.
So yeah, so that includes a 10% rate assumption. I found it for next year, because it went up, 11 and 12 this year.
Okay.
Okay. Any
Have you
other?
seen that kind of year-on-year increase
No.
in those rates? No, this isn't a big jump this year.
Yeah, one other year. So let's just talk about family plan because the rates change by the different. So family plan in January went up 12.7% from the year before. The year before that, it was 3, then it was a -1, it actually went down. Then it was 3, it was 8.5, and 12% in January of 17.
Do we
So
know what accounts for that jump?
they're nice ship rates. We don't set them.
No, I know we don't set them, but do we know why not NISHIP set it that much higher?
I don't, they don't put out a narrative that I've seen that explains these hikes. But I don't know. For the 1 year that it went down, they increased all their copays for all their insureds from 20 to 25. Most copays went up, $5 to $10 the year prior to that. So I'm making the assumption that it went down in premium because of that. But other than that, NISHIP has not given guidance that I've seen. It doesn't mean it's not there.
Thanks.
Is there anything in the village world or state world where we couldn't offer a second plan with some kind of incentive where if somebody doesn't need the Cadillac of a plan because of many reasons, they could take something less and participate in like a shared service kind of thing? I mean, does the state have anything where you have to be on one plan and one plan only versus like a cafeteria kind of plan that could suit an individual that maybe doesn't need a family $33,000 plan, but would rather put more money in their pockets?
So I believe that NISHIP has 2 plans.
Okay.
And I believe that previous trustees have looked into an alternate plan. And I don't know if it was that second NISHIP plan or what. I'm assuming it was. And the savings for the loss of coverage was not worth it at the time. It didn't make sense. But this is going a couple years back. But NISHIP, and I don't know if those 2 night shift plans are available to everybody, or if they're just available to state employees, and then, because you have a participating employer, a participating agency, a state agency, there's 5 different categories when you look at night shift.
Okay,
So I just know that there's 2 plans, but I don't know if a village is what makes us eligible for that second plan, if we even are.
got it.
But it needs to be through, I'm asking a question, I'm not stating, needs to be through NISHIP? Municipal employees need to have the insurance through NISHIP, or would we have an option to look beyond NISHIP?
I don't know.
We could add that as part of the handbook and take a look at it once. We're not
Yeah.
going to be able to accomplish that for this budget.
Right.
But for the future, that's something I think that we should at least take a look at.
I agree.
I know several other municipalities in the area definitely use NISHIP. I haven't heard of any other municipal worker not having NISHIP. Doesn't mean that it's not possible. It's not common that I know of, in our area.
Yeah, I think other than New York City, I think almost all the municipalities.
Use it.
I mean, it
Some of the largest
definitely,
cities.
yeah, I mean, if that's what everybody uses, it definitely impedes the ability to hire staff because of the cost.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Okay. Any other general fund comments? Questions?
No. You addressed all that I had.
Tremendous amount of work, Michelle.
We're
I do
2
want to ask
hours
a question about, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, we're 2 hours into this. We want to go on with the water and sewer. You want to stop here and save that for Wednesday? Michelle, critical
how-
things in there that need to be answered.
So I wanted to be honest, I didn't know if we were even gonna get through the whole general fund. So I'm glad we did that through a run. We're definitely not gonna be able to get through water and sewer. If we wanted to start water, we could leave it as a clean break. We are talking to Matt tomorrow, and that'll help. And I think that as much as I could still do another half hour, I think, brain capacity wise, that I think it would make sense to talk to Matt first and save water and sewer.
Yeah, I agree.
And then when we talk on Wednesday, it'll be in person in Village Hall. And we'll go through water and sewer as collective funds. So we'll address both revenue and expense at the same time. We went through revenue briefly, but until we answer some questions with Matt about the expense side, we can't just make decisions on the revenue side. Because water and sewer revenue is not like the general fund. It doesn't have all these extra revenue sources. It's just flat rates and usage rates, penalties, and that's it. So I think it would make sense to move it to next week.
It's not, I didn't mean to cut you off before. I know you're getting ready to ask questions.
That makes sense.
I was just gonna say that I would like to make some calls about, I want to understand why the streetlights can't be part of CCA. And I understand what you're saying, that they're not a building, but they're
Okay.
metered. So,
I'll email Jeff right now and he'll probably have an answer for us first thing in the morning.
right on.
Not Jeff,
Yes,
thank you.
CCA, Jeff.
Yes. Pointing as if everybody knows where they are on my screen.
Because, we don't have enough Jeffs in our life.
So Michelle, just process again.
Yes.
So we're basically in the general fund through with the very rough version 1.
Mhm.
Going forward, we're going to post all these documents so everybody can kind of follow along as we fine tune and tweak and take the
Mhm.
addresses off and do all that kind of stuff. That's how the
Yep.
process works in Village.
So we'll put up, I'm going to make some of those fund balance changes we talked about. And then I'll have a tentative budget ready to go for the general fund. I have one for water and sewer. Water is balanced right now without changing rates. It moved some things to the fund balance. Sewer is not balanced, but talking to Matt tomorrow, we might be able to figure out the employee salary, and if an employee is truly going to be spending more time other than 50-50 at the water plant, that might close some of the gap on the sewer side, creates a gap on the water fund, but I'll have a balanced budget posted. So then once we have these, and I'll send it all to the board before it gets posted. Once we have these drafts, or this tentative budget, that's what it's called, on March 20th. Usually what I do is anytime I make a change or anytime we have a meeting, I keep a running tally. So it's this one up, this one down, so we know. And then, all right, and I date all the documents so that, we're always working on the most recent one. So it's hard to keep track of too many changes while we're talking through getting to a draft version. I was able to do it on the revenue side because there wasn't too much to change. But now after this, I'll put up a tentative and then I'll have changes as we go to follow along.
Awesome.
And
Thank
then
you
as
so
we
much.
move forward and we get closer to like the narrative phase,
Mhm.
what I've always found helpful is if we could kind of bullet point what's new in the budget, what's been increased, what's been decreased, and then what's the story of the budget? Because the budget's ultimately a numerical version of the story that we're trying to convey to the public.
Right.
And if we can work that narrative and start working on it, I think it would be helpful rather than just numbers and X's and O's.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a real service, Joe.
Our budget theories changed at the school when we shifted that way versus the X's and O's, and people then kind of bought into it more, and it actually told a better story.
Yeah.
Because it is a story rather than just a number.
So I'm not a writer, I'm a math person, but if anybody wants to help write those beginning paragraph pages, be my guest. I welcome the narrative writing. I'll insert the numbers appropriately and we'll work together on it. I'm not offloading work, but some of those schedules need to be there in the beginning of the budget.
Yeah.
But a lot of the paragraphs, we can add or change and add pages, of course. And as long as we talk about the changes in the tax cap and the tax levy, add the schedules, we can add a page or two about the narrative and, what we're accomplishing, more than just mine saying we upped the water fund because we got new endpoints, because that would be my bullet point that I put in there, for being honest. That's
We'll
what
make
I've
it
done
so.
in the past.
We will make it so.
Yeah, I think the narrative part will be easy.
And are we putting for that for the public hearing on April 13th?
Okay.
Is that, I'm asking a question, is that correct? Is that?
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Jeff. Can you ask the question again?
Are we shooting for the narrative on April 13th, which will be the public hearing?
Well, we'd want to have it available before the public hearing. It needs to be available, what, 10 days before, 5 days before?
Well, the narrative, I think.
24 hours before.
What?
24 hours before.
For a public hearing? That's,
Now, we have to notice the public hearing
but
5 days before.
okay. I thought we're striving to get it. I would like to strive to have it out at least the weekend before, if we could, the Friday before.
Give people a
Be my
chance
guest.
to
I'm
see
on
it.
vac-
Say that again?
I said, I'm on vacation, so it's.
Oh, yeah. So
So-
Jeff says fine, great. Are we finished with our budget discussion for the evening? Okay, comment from the public who have hung on with us through all of this budget discussion. Would anyone like to make a comment? Mike?
You're muted.
Yeah, he's muted.
Yep, he's getting there.
Sure am. So just two quickies regarding the parking program. Am I correct that it's trustees Foddy and Starbuck who are working on it, and the goal is to roll it out in terms of the residential parking permits and Main Street fees this summer? Is that accurate?
We're hoping to do the resident parking permit before the summer. So we're actually meeting tomorrow, and as soon as we can get the signage up and whatever it takes to roll it out. It would be I would say a late spring.
I could describe it as a residential parking permits first, Main Street fees to follow.
Main Street metering to follow, maybe in the fall. I mean, this is, I like to use the word partnership. So we are going to need the residents' feedback on how it's working. We don't want to put meters on Main Street before we feel everybody has a chance to digest resident parking permits.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one is just really for Jeff. Jeff, the dates for the new Royal trash and recycling containers, what are the weekends that they're coming in?
It still is to be determined. They had said that April 7th or shortly thereafter. So we don't have a definitive date yet.
So after April 7th?
Correct.
Okay. And is
Shortly after April 7th.
okay. And is their location determined for the dumpster for getting rid of the old people's old containers?
Not yet.
Not yet. We're discussing a location for it, but it will be convenient.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Anyone else from the public? Well, nice to see everyone. Thank you for hanging on till 9:10. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Michelle, so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was unbelievable amount of work.
Thorough.
Thorough, for sure.
I'll send you my spreadsheets if you want them. Anybody's interested.
I have spreadsheets, but different kind.
Thank you.
You're welcome.